dia a todos. Penso que me estão a ouvir. Estão-me a ouvir bem. Pela quarta vez, a APIT realiza o seu encontro de profissionais, a que eu resolvi chamar de uma forma extremamente original e criativa, quarto encontro, produtores independentes de televisão. Obviamente que os meus produtores são bastante mais criativos que eu e mais criativos ainda os designers que fizeram o nosso novo logotipo, que estou a apresentar agora aqui formalmente em primeira mão. Foi um rebranding, que é uma coisa muito... convém sempre dizer as palavras em estrangeiro, e é um rebranding que fizemos ao nosso logo e que parece-nos bastante mais atualizado. Permitam-me que as minhas primeiras palavras sejam para os associados da APIT, para este fantástico conjunto de empresas que, apesar das suas diferentes dimensões, das suas diferentes estruturas, da sua diferente organização, se têm mantido juntas por aquilo que é o mais importante, que é a defesa do audiovisual nacional e tornando assim, obviamente, a associação mais forte e reconhecida. Eu hoje estou particularmente nervosa, o que não é muito costume, e portanto o melhor é partilhar já que estou nervosa para ver se passa. Mas, de facto, era por aqui que eu queria começar, por agradecer aos associados, agradecer a confiança que depositaram em mim ao me terem nomeado em janeiro deste ano Presidente Executiva da APIT. Espero estar à altura da vossa confiança e depois agradecer-vos a vossa presença, porque estes eventos, tal como tudo aquilo que fazemos na APIT, são pensados para vocês. Faço sempre o exercício de pensar o que é que os associados quererão ouvir, o que é que lhes interessa ouvir, o que é que lhes pode ajudar no seu dia-a-dia. Por isso, obrigada a todos e começo sempre por vocês, por estarem aqui hoje. Gostaria, assim, de cumprimentar o excelentíssimo Presidente do ICA e o excelentíssimo Vice-Presidente do ICA que estão aqui presentes hoje. Muito obrigada. O excelentíssimo Presidente da Confederação de Comércio e Serviços, que temos a honra de ter connosco pela primeira vez e que é um prazer tê-lo cá. Cumprimentar mais representantes do Instituto de Cinema e Audiovisual que cá estão, a representante do CGI e da RTP, representantes também da entidade reguladora, que é muito bom que estejam presentes neste tipo de encontros, representantes dos partidos políticos, representantes, obviamente, dos canais, que são os nossos principais clientes, dos canais dos analistas e dos operadores de cabo, das associações do setor e também das entidades de gestão coletiva. Eu começaria por dizer que, para já, queria ver se funcionava. Não funcionou, andei um slide para a frente. Ups. Ok, será que eu agora consigo pôr? Ok, acho que não, está tudo a correr mal. Vamos começar? Ok. Pronto. Estamos de novo reunidos nesta sala tão inspiradora, não só pela vista, que hoje infelizmente está um dia chuvoso, porque isso é que eu não consegui tornar melhor, mas é inspiradora também pelo poeta que lhe dá nome. Para fazer exatamente o quê? Vamos discutir, saber em que estado é que está o audiovisual e as formas que este setor tem de crescer e de se desenvolver. E assim, no final do dia, que deve mais ou menos acontecer por volta das 6 da tarde, seremos seguramente capazes de responder a essa questão de qual é o estado do setor audiovisual em Portugal. Até porque temos a sorte de poder contar com representantes dos 3 canais generalistas, RTP, SIC e TVI, e também dos operadores por cabo que se quiseram juntar a nós e a PT, e são empresas que lidam todos os dias com este setor e que nos vão seguramente ajudar a perceber, então, qual será o estado da arte do audiovisual. Isto será ao final, às 6 da tarde, quando já estivermos todos a saímos seguramente daqui com essa noção do ponto de situação do audiovisual nacional. E, imediatamente antes, contamos com o Presidente do ICA, a quem agradeço uma vez mais a disponibilidade para estar aqui hoje e fazer esta apresentação, que nos vai falar dos apoios que nós já sabemos que existem para o audiovisual, mas essencialmente nos irá falar dos novos incentivos que existem e que já todos ouvimos e lemos algumas notícias que visam dinamizar e promover o audiovisual e, obviamente, o país também. E, portanto, antes mesmo de sabermos como é que está o estado do audiovisual nacional, temos a capacidade de poder saber como é que irá estar, porque estes incentivos são essencialmente para o futuro. E por falar em incentivos, vamos apresentar um plano legislativo que uma das coisas que fala é exatamente na necessidade de criar incentivos. Eu até diria que, se eu soubesse que não tinha sido assim, que o ICA se tinha inspirado neste nosso plano. Mas eu sei que não, porque eles não tiveram acesso a ele. Mas é um estudo que adjudicámos à Ernst Young, Augusto Mateus Associados, e com a participação da Gama Glória Advogados, que fizeram um estudo em que apresentamos várias propostas legislativas para alteração do mercado audiovisual. Se se recordam, no último encontro tínhamos feito a apresentação do estudo de produção de conteúdos audiovisuais em Portugal e terminávamos falando sobre a necessidade desse estudo de promover alterações legislativas, sem as quais, obviamente, o audiovisual não irá evoluir. Essas propostas vão ser apresentadas esta tarde. Há incentivos, obviamente, uma das propostas é incentivos, mas haverá muito mais do que isso, propostas concretas de alteração de lei que queremos que vão alterar o setor e que eu acho que vão gostar. E como não gostar de conhecer o setor em que nos movemos. E nós lançámos um desafio à GFK para nos dizer uma coisa que se fala muito e que se calhar sabemos pouco, que é, afinal, quem é que nos vê? Que público é este? E o que é que eles veem? Será que, de facto, chegam todos a casa cheios de vontade de serem programadores e se sentam no sofá e fazem uma grelha e passam ali a noite só a ver a série tal que querem e que desejam? Ou não? São preguiçosos, sentam-se e o que a televisão generalista lhes oferecer é o que elas veem? Ou será que só veem novelas? Ou será que só veem séries? Ou será que já ninguém vê a televisão em ecrã, que é outra coisa que também se diz muito? Ninguém vê tudo em tablets e em PCs. E o António Gomes da GFK veio exatamente dizer-nos se é assim ou não que a coisa termina. E é assim que nós vamos iniciar a tarde. Porque amanhã essa termina com mais um painel de luxo, moderado pela professora Catarina Brunet, à semelhança do último que encerra o dia. A professora Catarina é uma profunda conhecedora do setor e agradeço-lhe o facto de ter aceito este desafio para fazer a moderação destes dois painéis. Também aí vamos contar com os melhores. Temos representantes das 3 estações jornalistas e dos produtores que nos vão dizer se estamos a fazer... Será que estamos a fazer alguma coisa mal ou, afinal, estamos a fazer bem? São pessoas que vão todos os dias, vão aos vários mercados que existem e que sabem o que é que procuram, o que é que eles procuram e o que é que os outros que estão no mercado procuram. Será que estamos a fazer alguma coisa mal ou não? Ou estamos até a fazer tudo bem e, por alguma razão, não conseguimos exportar? Esse vai ser dos principais painéis que vamos realmente focar-nos outra vez nesta questão da exportação e da internacionalização, que é fundamental. E para nos lembrar que é possível esta internacionalização, convidámos um produtor bem aqui perto de nós, um produtor francês, uma produtora que foi que fez a primeira série original francesa para o Netflix, o Marseille, e que nos veio falar dessa experiência e não só, de outras experiências que têm tido de trabalho com a Netflix. Será que é igual trabalhar com eles? Se o modelo de negócio é igual? Quais os prós, quais os contras? Vamos falar, sem dúvida, de coproduzir, cofinanciar. São temas que seguramente vão ser abordados pelo Jean-Michel e que nos vão dar elementos para pensarmos como fazer isto em Portugal. E isso fundamentalmente para percebermos que é algo que está aqui perto, que muitas vezes nos parece tão distante, mas está aqui perto. De mais distante vem seguramente o nosso primeiro orador. Aí quisemos ser ambiciosos e permitam-me que destaque a participação, a preciosa ajuda da Embaixada Americana na pessoa do Nicolau Anderson. Aproveito para... Obrigada, Nick. Sem a qual teria sido, como calculam, impossível chegar à fala com o produtor, com o currículo do José Molina. José Molina conta com êxitos que todos nós vimos, Castle, Lei e Ordem, Sem Rasto, entre tantos outros, e que nos vem falar de que como é que é o processo produtivo em Hollywood. Será que é igual ao nosso? Como é que eles fazem as coisas? Porque, de facto, para nós, Hollywood é pensamos, eu pensava sempre que seria um sítio giro para trabalhar, mas é onde vem realmente muita coisa que nós vemos todos os dias. Como é que eles fazem? Já sabemos que tem muito mais dinheiro. Essa parte já sabemos. Mas o processo em si, o chegar da ideia até ao ecrã, será ou não será a mesma coisa? Estes são, portanto, as pessoas com que vamos contar. Permitam-me só que façam uma saudação aos nossos convidados que não perceberam absolutamente nada do que eu tenho estado a dizer até agora. Bienvenue Jean-Michel, nous sommes très heureux de vous être ici avec nous et de vous avoir accepté notre invitation pour partager votre expérience de produire avec Netflix. Merci beaucoup. Be very welcome, José Molina. It's a pleasure to have you here, to take us on a trip to show us how an idea that starts on a blank page turns to reach the screen. Thank you very much for your presence here. Estamos, portanto, quase a terminar. Como vêem, eu ainda consigo continuar nervosa até o final da apresentação, mas é normal. Não quero terminar, não sem antes fazer dois pequenos avisos e dois importantes agradecimentos. Avisar-vos provavelmente já todos deram conta, que há um Wi-Fi do CCB livre, portanto se podem ligar assim que necessitem. E outra é que o nosso encontro está, à semelhança do ano passado, a ser transmitido em streaming no nosso site, www.aptv.com, onde, se por acaso, uma coisa assim muito fora de... tiverem que sair, não deixem de acompanhar o que continuamos a fazer na nossa página. E isso permite-me agradecer ao Paulo Feliciano, ao nosso associado VITEC, que veio dos Açores, uma vez mais, com material para fazer isto com a melhor cara sempre possível, e é um prazer tê-lo cá, Paulo. Obrigado uma vez mais por esta ajuda que nos dá. Depois fazer dois agradecimentos. O primeiro à Patrícia. Os associados todos conhecem a Patrícia, muitos de vós não. É que eu pedi pela primeira vez para estar dentro da sala, porque ela está sempre lá fora. A Patrícia está comigo há 16 anos, é o meu braço direito e o meu braço esquerdo, e eu queria-lhe fazer ninguém cresce sozinho, e era importante para mim fazer-lhe este agradecimento e dizer que chegou o dia e vai correr bem, seguramente. E depois queria agradecer à Leonor. A Leonor tem 15 anos, pegou num iPhone e com o iMovie idealizou estes pequenos vídeos que vocês têm estado a ver. Idealizou como é que ia fazer, portanto produziu, realizou, editou e levou até si estes pequenos vídeos que espero que tenham gostado durante a minha apresentação. A Leonor, por acaso, é minha filha e está presente na sala, e obviamente que eu tinha que lhe agradecer. Obrigada, querida, por a ajuda. E agora é que é, portanto, vamos dar início aos trabalhos. Muito obrigada a todos. José, can you please come to make your presentation?
PowerPoint or the video? The video at the end. Good morning. It starts on the page. That's the motto of the Writers Guild of America. But it's also a simple fact about how every American program you've ever seen originates. It starts with a writer facing a blank page and going through numerous hurdles to try to get that idea before an audience. While it's not uncommon for a producer or a studio to initiate the process of making a show, their first step in making it happen is hiring a writer who can bring it to reality. So where does the idea for that show come from? There are two traditional avenues. The first way is the easiest to understand. A writer simply has an idea and develops it from scratch. The other way is through what's commonly known as intellectual property, or IP. Simply put, the term intellectual property encompasses anything covered by copyright, trademark, or patent. It means that the premise that birthed the television show didn't originate with the writer who created the series. The idea can come from a variety of sources. For instance, comic books gave us The Walking Dead and novels gave us Game of Thrones. The Israeli show Prisoners of War gave us the Emmy-winning American series Homeland. But IP can also come from a variety of places, a video game or a podcast or an article in a magazine or newspaper. A few years ago, a studio even tried to develop Bazooka Joe as a movie. Do you guys know what Bazooka Joe is? It's a little piece of gum like the gorilla gum. They tried to make that into a movie. So IP can come from anything, even from a gum wrapper. More and more of late, Hollywood has been trending towards developing intellectual property into TV shows and movies. Although some would say it's to the detriment of the medium, I would remind those critics that TV has always relied on pre-existing properties. Lassie came from a book, and The Lone Ranger originated as a radio serial. In the case of shows that are born of IP, the most common scenario is for a producer or studio to option or buy the rights to the existing material and to hire a writer to turn it into a show. It's common for the producer who controls the IP to have what's known in the industry as a bake-off, which means that they invite several writers to vie for the opportunity to develop the property. Whichever writer presents the vision that the producers like the best wins the chance to turn it into a TV show. It's also possible for a writer to acquire a piece of IP on his or her own, or for the creator of the original IP to hook up with a screenwriter to spearhead the adaptation. The juggernaut that is Game of Thrones started because George Martin's agent, George Martin the novelist, his agent sent the novelist to screenwriter Dan Benioff in hopes that he would adapt it. But because of the slow-moving machine that is Hollywood, even though Benioff bit at the opportunity, it took over 5 years to turn that first meeting into a TV show. When a show originates with a screenwriter's original idea, the path to selling a show and to getting paid is more straightforward. When you have an original idea that you think might make a good show, you have two traditional options. You can pitch it to potential buyers, or you can write it on spec. Spec is short for speculatively. It means that you write the pilot script that will be the basis for your show in hopes that a network will buy it. And by the way, when I say network here, I include cable networks like HBO or streamers like Netflix under the banner of network. So you write the script completely on your own without attaching a producer or a studio, and it's a lot of work that may lead to nothing if you fail to sell it, but it can also be the best way of getting a clear vision across to a prospective buyer. A lot of writers write pilots on spec because even when the scripts don't sell, the new material serves as a potential writing sample that other potential employers can read. It's not impossible to get a spec on air. Mad Men and Desperate Housewives are famous examples of successful shows that started with a spec, but the more common route is to pitch your show. The vast majority of shows on your TV or your computer started out as a pitch. Whether you're a writer who had an original idea or a writer who was brought on to develop an existing piece of IP, chances are you're going to end up in a conference room about the size of this, trying to verbally sell your idea to a buyer. When you pitch a show, you have less than an hour to convince someone to give you a lot of money to buy your show. If you're a screenwriter who came up with a brilliant idea, it's crucial to come into this meeting with as many reasons as possible to make the buyer say yes. Sometimes you're the reason, if your name is Aaron Sorkin or Shonda Rhimes, but more often than not, you want to surround yourself with a team that makes your idea hard to reject, or with a variety of other supplemental materials. At the end of my presentation, I'm going to show you what we call a sizzle reel. And this is one for a show that I was pitching that we made up to try to convince the buyers to commit. So this is why this notion of putting all your cards on the table and trying to give a hard sell to the buyer is why most writers, whether they spec the script or crafted the idea into a pitch, will seek out a partnership with a producer. There are three kinds of producers in TV in the States. The most common is the writer-producer. That's what I am. A writer-producer is responsible for not only writing the scripts for the episodes that you're going to see, but also for overseeing several key aspects of production. I'll come back to the writer-producer in a little bit when I talk about the role of a showrunner. The second kind of producer is the line producer. The line producer is responsible for every aspect of physical production. They're the boss of everyone except for the writers. From casting to stunts to wardrobe, everyone except for the writer answers to the line producer. Their main job is to make sure that the scripts the writers deliver can be produced on budget and on time, and to make sure that all the departments deliver their work on budget and on time. The third kind of producer, and this is the one that you want to get on your side when you're pitching a show, is what's typically called as a non-writing EP, EP being short for executive producer. The non-writing EP typically has a production company that produces other shows. Sometimes these production companies are directly affiliated with a studio or a network. They have what's called a shingle inside the studio or the network. A good producer usually has a good relationship with the studio or the network, often because they prove themselves to be reliable providers of content by having other shows on the air. Sometimes producers will have access to directors or stars that can help make your show more appealing to a buyer. If you have a star or a director attached to your project when you make your pitch, and ideally if you can have these people present at your pitch meeting, the odds of selling your idea skyrocket. Even if you don't have a star or a director, having a producer with a proven track record at your side tells the people holding the checkbook that you're as reliable as these people that they know already and trust. This is the path, for instance, that the creators of Stranger Things followed. The Duffer Brothers, who are the creators of the show, were unknown writers who had had a little bit of experience but had a great idea. They wanted to do an homage to the classic horror and sci-fi movies of the 1980s. They knew exactly what they wanted to do. They had a clear vision for the show, but they didn't have enough clout for buyers to take them seriously. So they took out their idea with a spec pilot and a show Bible, and they took it to a number of different outlets, and all of them passed. Until the brothers met and attached producers Dan Cohen and Sean Levy, who hadn't done a lot of TV, but had produced the successful Night at the Museum movies. With these reputable producers on board, the show quickly sold to Netflix with a straight-to-series order. So what's the lesson here? For both writers and producers, the lesson is that the relationship between the two is symbiotic. It behooves writers to find producers they can trust with their material, and it benefits producers to seek out and nurture new voices that may not yet have the success they need to sell their own show. It's crucial for producers to understand and embrace what I said at the beginning of this presentation. It starts on the page. The more writers you know, the more you can help them hone their material into something spectacular. The more the writers you work with can trust you, the better for everyone involved. Keep in mind, in American television, the producer isn't spending any of his or her money. In feature films, the producer is often responsible for coming up with the financing for a film, but in television, that's the studio's job. The producer is there to put all the pieces together at the beginning of a production and to help ensure that everything runs smoothly once the show is on its feet. In American television, the head writer of a show is called the showrunner, and the showrunner is the boss of everyone, including the line producer. The showrunner answers only to their corporate bosses at the studio and the network. They make the final decisions on everything, from the first word on the script to the last cut in the edit bay. They're the keepers of the creative vision of a show. The job of the producer is to help the showrunner in a variety of different ways, which are individual to the relationship between the producer, the non-writing EP, and the showrunner. I've had showrunners who hate the politics of dealing with the studio and ask their non-writing EPs to act as a liaison between them. I've known producers who help by covering set when a writer isn't available to be there. I've also had producers who are never heard from again once they help sell the show. Needless to say, the job description is pretty flexible. Now back to pitching, which is a process that has changed dramatically ever since streaming giants like Netflix, Amazon, and Hulu entered the playing field. 10 years ago, your best hope was to sell your show to NBC, CBS, ABC, or Fox. These guys had the most prestige, but more importantly, they had the most money to spend, which meant you could produce a more ambitious show and get richer while doing it. Yes, you could sell to other outlets like the Sci-Fi Channel or USA or TNT, but everybody wanted to be in business with the big boys. Of course, the big boys have now changed. Now everyone wants to be in business with Netflix, Amazon, and Hulu. Why? Some will make a case for creative freedom, but anybody who has worked with these new streaming networks will tell you that the creative process is nearly identical to working with the old networks. So why does everyone suddenly want to work with the streamers? As it so often does in Hollywood, the answer is money. As they launched over the last decade, these fledgling outlets needed to make a splash to compete with the old guard. In order to make a splash, they needed to make a product that was recognizably A-list. And the way you make A-list product is to spend money. House of Cards was Netflix's first ever TV show. It was produced and directed by visionary director David Fincher and starred Oscar-winning director Kevin Spacey. It also cost more than any other comparable network drama at the time. Since then, the budgets have only skyrocketed. Netflix and Amazon now produce shows that cost upwards of $10 million an episode to launch, when its most expensive rivals average about $4.5 million per episode. With these budgets, it's no wonder that writers, directors, and actors are flocking to the streaming outlets. They can make art at the highest standards, television that looks like big budget movies, television with no holds barred. So why not go there instead of to the old guard? But wait a minute, what does that have to do with pitching? Well, beyond higher budgets allowing creators to envision more ambitious stories, the streamers caused a quantum shift in the way television is written these days. And that affects everything from the inception of the idea to how it's developed into a series. Streamers want audiences to binge their shows, which means they want complicated, serialized storytelling that will keep the audience clicking to watch the next episode. A decade ago, you would have been crazy to pitch a serialized show. Now it's a must. More and more, when writers pitch their series to a network, especially a cable network or a streaming outlet, they're not pitching the pilot and the kinds of episodes that will stem from it. They're pitching a fully conceived story. Sometimes that story is a season long, sometimes it's several seasons long. In fact, when Vince Gilligan pitched Breaking Bad to AMC, he described a 5-season arc for Walter White that would see him devolve from a kind-hearted teacher like Mr. Chips in Goodbye, Mr. Chips, to a cold-hearted kingpin like Scarface. The point being that the tried-and-true cop, lawyer, doctor franchises that saw the protagonists solving a standalone case every week is no longer the golden egg. Serialized storytelling is where it's at. Which brings us back to the topic of IP. Shows like Game of Thrones or Walking Dead have had sprawling stories in their original media that a buyer can look at and understand exactly where the show might go beyond the first season. You can read the comic, you can read the novels, you can see how the story is going to sustain for years on end. This provides a level of creative security that an original idea simply can't. Beyond that, even a modest IP can provide a network with enough name recognition to help with the show's promotability. Why would Netflix greenlight an original superhero show when they can make Jessica Jones? Why would the CW make an original Latin drama when it can acquire the rights to a popular Mexican soap and turn it into Jane the Virgin? These original IPs may not have meant much to the average viewer before they were developed, but they meant something to somebody. And networks are banking on that little bit of curiosity to drive people to their programming when they make their creative decisions. The writer that walks in the door without even the most modest piece of IP has an uphill climb. Which takes us all the way back to the writer who showed up at the network's door trying to sell his idea. Let's say he sold it. Congratulations. What happens next? The network tends to buy a pilot script first, which means that after months of hard work, our writer is finally getting paid, which means it's time to talk deal. In the States, when you sell a show, you're typically dealing with two corporate entities, a network and a studio. The studio owns the show, flat out. They hold all the rights that are not specifically negotiated by the studio. You know the names of the big studios: Universal, 20th Century Fox, Disney, etc. They pay the show creators a salary to make the show, and typically allow them to retain about 12% of the show itself. An attached producer will also receive a small percentage, as will an actor or a director who's involved at this stage. The studio pays out the money to make the show. The cost of actually producing the show and putting it on the air is up to them to produce. Say the $4 million an episode it costs to physically produce a show on the big four networks. The studio takes the biggest financial risk up front and reaps the biggest financial benefits if the show is successful, and they can then sell it into syndication or into the various foreign markets. The network risks less and therefore benefits less. To put the show on their air, the network pays what's called a license fee, which is a fraction of the show's actual budget. They then make their money by selling commercials that air during that show. But the advent of the streaming outlets has started a shift in this traditional paradigm. For the last few decades, networks have often had corporate partners, studios that produce the content that they aired. ABC had Disney, NBC had Universal, Fox had 20th Century Fox, etc. But Netflix and Amazon have no corporate overlords, and they've decided to combine the roles of the studio and the network under one roof. When you pitch to Netflix or Amazon, it's now something of a liability to have a studio attached. These new players want to be the studio and the network themselves. They don't want someone else taking the big risk and reaping the big reward. They want to produce the show themselves and air it on their platform. Which begs the question, how do these companies have so much money at their disposal to begin with? That's another way in which the streamers are changing the paradigm. Instead of taking the big chances up front and hoping to sell their show once it's successful into syndication or internationally, as the studios have been doing for decades, the streamers are pre-selling their titles abroad before they even roll cameras, allowing them to spend freely with minimum risk. But there's always some risk inherent in making a TV show, and networks have to pick and choose which ones they think have the best chance of being successful. Otherwise, every writer who walks into a network with an idea would get a TV show made. The old wisdom told us that there were only so many hours a network could program, and this was true until streaming came about. The average network had fewer than 20 hours of airtime a week before their slate was filled to capacity. But streamers don't program by the hour. Netflix recently announced that they will release around 700 new series and movies this year, including 80 original productions from outside the United States. So wait, with that number of shows, does it mean that every writer and producer can get a show on the air? No. In fact, let's check back with the writer who was lucky enough to sell his series pitch. Once his deal is closed, the writer will go off to write an outline for the pilot script. The producer, studio, and network will ask for changes to the outline until they're satisfied that it's in good enough shape to become a script. Then the writer will spend 2 to 3 weeks writing the script, which will again undergo revisions suggested by the producers in the studio before going to the network for its day in court, before they decide whether they want to shoot the pilot episode. This is the next big hurdle for the writer. Compared to shooting a full pilot episode, scripts are cheap, so networks buy far more scripts than they intend to make. Even if you're lucky enough to sell your script in the first place, you only have about a 10 to 15% chance of seeing that script shot. If you're one of the lucky ones and you get your script greenlit, you get to film your script. You get to hire a director, you get to cast your actors, you get to find your locations, and make the show you saw in your head. For a writer-producer, there's nothing more gratifying, but you're not at the finish line yet. Like they do at the script stage, networks shoot far more pilots than they will order a series. Once you deliver your final product, the network then retreats into private meetings to decide whether they think your pilot is good enough to merit putting it on the air and ordering more episodes. This process can last weeks, as the various strata of executives watch and chime in with their opinions. The final pilot is also screened for test audiences around the country, which means ordinary TV consumers get to tell your prospective bosses whether they love or hate your show. These test audiences can be vicious. I once actually had a member of a test audience criticize the wallpaper in a scene. But here's another way in which streamers are changing the game. We talked about the serialized nature of programmers like Netflix and Amazon. We covered how show creators must now present a fully realized vision of a first season and beyond in order to sell their series. Well, here at the series order stage is where that can pay off. A lot of streamers don't believe in the old math. They believe that shooting a dozen expensive pilots and ordering only 1 or 2 to series is wasteful. So they're more deliberate in which scripts they choose to sink their money into, and often bypass shooting the pilot and order the show straight to series based on the pilot script. This new philosophy can create a virtuous circle. An A-list actor is less likely to sign up for a pilot that may never see the light of day, but guarantee that his show will air, and the odds jump exponentially. Therefore, the network's commitment to a series order helps them attach a significant talent, which in turn raises the marquee value of their new series. But ultimately, even a show that's lucky enough to make it to air faces one final hurdle: the audience. For every Stranger Things and House of Cards, there are dozens of series that show up on your TV or computer and disappear in the blink of an eye. The creators of those shows aren't less talented than the others, nor did they work less hard, but audiences are ultimately fickle and unpredictable, and no revolutionary streaming service or 21st century metrics can save some shows from cancellation. But there's one benefit we all reap from these streaming upstarts that has nothing to do with bottom lines, ratings, and popularity. As I mentioned, Netflix is partnering with dozens of countries across the world to create new content. Their brand extends to over 190 countries. Their newest show, Altered Carbon, features a cast from all around the globe. Because Netflix and Amazon aren't exclusively targeting American audiences, these streamers are looking for content that has worldwide appeal. That means they want stories that have unique international voices, actors that look different than the traditional matinee idols, and places that represent the vast variety of cultures on the planet. They know that they can make money by making their shows look more like the world around them. But I think making TV shows look more like the world around us can help bring the world together and make us realize that we are more alike than we think. And I believe that if we can show the world how to coexist on our screens, we may just show them how to coexist in the real world. Thank you. So now I'm going to show you something that you'll hopefully think is fun. This is the sizzle reel that I promised you. So my friend and I were approached by the head of Sony Studio to develop a role-playing game for them. And so it's a role-playing game kind of like Dungeons and Dragons. I don't know if you're familiar with that. And it's just the rules for the game. And so we were tasked with creating a show around that. And that's what we did. But we had these 2 massive books with a lot of illustrations, a lot of art. And so we decided one thing we could do to help us show the tone and the vibe of the show to our prospective buyers, because it's a weird world and it's a weird universe that we're trying to sell, was to make this 2.5-minute sizzle reel that would essentially give them an idea of what a commercial for the show might look like. So here it is.
I was just like you once. I had a good job, a husband I adored. We were about to have a daughter. Then the men came to tell me about the end of the world. I had skills they needed, so I made a deal to save my family. We were supposed to wake up shortly after the asteroids hit. Me, my family, my team. We had a plan to restart our way of life. But our plan failed. I woke up centuries too late. Cities had fallen. Ice caps had melted. A plague had swept across the planet. Civilization as we knew it crumbled. The survivors descended into a hell of sex and violence. The world I knew wasn't just gone, it had turned into a nightmare. Doctors became warriors. Armies became cults. Nations became barbaric clans. Life became war. But the plague from the asteroid spawned something beyond mere illness, a terrifying mutation that threatened all life. They called it homodegenesis. My daughter is out there in this nightmare, frozen in a cryogenic sleep across the continent. To find her, I will have to trust 4 strangers from this terrifying future. But I will find her, and we will build a life together, even if I have to go through hell to do it.
So this is just one example of the kinds of material that you can bring with you to a pitch to try to make it easy for them to buy it. These guys listen to dozens of pitches a week, and it's their first reaction is always to say no. So if you can bring an actor, a director, a producer, something like this that makes them want to eat popcorn and give you money, do it. Thank you.
Thank you, José, for your great presentation. Jean-Michel, I think they're going to put you the micro.
Thank you.
Podem, por favor.
Usually I can speak pretty loud, but I don't know if it's going to be enough. The short one. Yeah, but
The short one.
Not
Not now?
Not immediately.
Okay. When you want, vai passar, mas não é já. Quer primeiro que eu...
You think it's working? No? No, it doesn't work. Okay. That's a good reason. No? Yeah. Ooh, exciting. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for having me here today. Originally, the idea was for Pascal Breton, the founder of the company, to be here. Unfortunately, it wasn't possible for him to be here to discuss about Marseille, which is the series that we did. We were like the first European company to do a Netflix original, which was like a fun thing for us just as when we were just a small little startup. So it was a good kickoff to start. Maybe I should tell you briefly, who we are, so you can understand, how we structure this deal and how we're structuring the other deal that we're doing as well with Netflix on a different basis, which I think will be more relevant for you. Portuguese producer, which, as I know, have like a smaller budget, to put it like that, bigger constraint, and how can we still make a great show happen with a smaller budget and greater constraint, which we've been doing as well. Basically, the company is only 5 years old. We started really as a small starter. The company was founded by Pascal Breton, who was originally the founder of Marathon. Marathon became Zodiac. While he was at Zodiac, he produced Millennium, which was a fun show to produce. And after things changed, and anyway, to make a long story short, he had the opportunity to leave and start something new, which we did with a small team of people that have been in business for a long time, but who really had the passion to to come back, especially in drama. We really started with drama because, as you all know today, I mean, drama is booming like crazy, and it's the fun time to be in drama. So we started to develop, we pitched a few shows, and one of them was Marseille, that got picked up by Netflix. At the same time, we had as well a Canal Plus original, which is the Bureau in English, Le Bureau des Légendes in French, which is the series that we did for Canal Plus, which is now in its 4th season. So we were also pretty happy with these two shows as a starting point to start building our business around. Basically, let me go back to just to explain you like the different model that exists at Netflix. As José was describing before, one big model at Netflix is really the Netflix original that you see highly branded on the service. Although it's important to know, as you will see, that not all the things that are branded original are real original. I mean, we'll go to that in a minute, and I think that's when it's becoming more interesting for you as well. A true Netflix original or the international original are shows that are really, I mean, commissioned ultimately by Netflix, and basically they will be the studio, the network, as José was describing so well. Basically, they will order show based on a pitch that we did, but again, I mean, especially on this kind of thing, they will be looking at a package. I mean, again, if you're like just a small producer or just with a good idea, it's very difficult to make that happen. The way we managed to make that happen with Marseille is we had like a very strong writer that was the creator of the show. It was Dan Frank, who did Carlos, who was like a big series on Canal Plus, very strong in France. And we had Gérard Depardieu, which was a big name, obviously. And we had a good director, which again, for the French market, was a pretty big name as well. Again, for this international Netflix original, the idea is to build something in the territory of origin, in this case was France, that has like a added value, obviously, for the French market, like something that we'll know will be very strong because, I mean, it's Depardieu, it's a big traditional writer that we know will deliver what we want, a good director, showrunner that hopefully will deliver what we want as well. And that has a chance to travel internationally and touch the 110 million subscribers that they will have worldwide. But at the beginning, the idea is to have a show that's really, I mean, it's local. I mean, as they call it, it's the glocal. I mean, global, local. I mean, it has to be local to start and to build, but to be able to speak to the global audience. So that's one big business, which is a tough business. And basically, I mean, Netflix is the producer. I mean, they will finance the show. They will work with you. Basically, not so far from a traditional network. I mean, it's true that sometimes they're like probably they will give you a little more freedom on the creative aspect, a little more. But actually, I mean, if they're going to choose you, it's because they're going to trust that the package that you're going to bring to the table is a package that makes sense. I mean, obviously, they will follow the writing with you, but they haven't been, for us, very intrusive. I mean, ultimately, something which was like the toughest for us is like on subject, like which, I mean, could become politically incorrect. That because, again, we're going to be talking to the world, so there are a few aspects that will say that's going to be tough. I mean, but usually much less than a traditional network in one territory that needs to target like for the biggest, broadest possible audience on that territory, which doesn't allow you to be very creative very often. Sometimes, yes, but in many cases in Europe, unfortunately, I'm sure that you've been doing the exercise with some of the big network, they may be intrusive, which is not the funniest thing that can happen. For us, I mean, on Marseille, I mean, The only thing that became problematic on season 2 is at one point, I don't know if you had a chance to see it yet, but you should. It's a good show, by the way. Don't hesitate to click, watch, and watch it again. But on the second season, we had an abortion. And that was a big issue for them because abortion is controversial. So that was one of the biggest issues that we had to fight for. I mean, in the story, that was a very key element of the story, so we've been fighting to make that happen, and ultimately they agreed. But just to give you, I mean, that was like the biggest and the toughest thing we had to deal with. Otherwise, I mean, it's almost like a traditional order from a network to deliver a good show that, I mean, has like this strong local value, and that will be able to travel. Just for you to, I mean, I voluntarily decided to sit here, and I would like this to be as interactive as possible. So if you have any question, please do not hesitate to interrupt me if you have like, but anyway, I'll keep going, and you can ask questions at any time you want. The other thing which, I mean, we kept doing for us as a small company, because, I mean, we were really like a very small company at the beginning. Today we're like slightly bigger, and now we have about like 40, 50 people on board. But it's still, I mean, still a small company. One thing that we were very keen to develop was to go all around the world, and this is why one of the reasons why the company is called Federation. We wanted to go around and to federate some of the best producers all around the world. And we did that, and one of the reasons I was happy to come to Portugal, it's because I'm hoping to do the same here, and I know I met already some talented producers yesterday, and I know there is talent here, and I hope we can replicate what we've been doing in other territories in Portugal as well. One of the first shows that we did on this logic was an Israeli show. Actually, the first season was already produced. It's a show called Hostages that you might have seen, which is, I think, one of the most brilliant shows that I saw. When I saw that originally, I was shocked. They made like an American remake, which unfortunately failed totally, although it was like done by Jerry Bruckheimer with a budget which I think was like 20 times more than the original budget. And unfortunately, it was bad, while the original was so strong, so good. So we went to the producer, and basically with them, we produced the second season together. So the show was as well on Canal+, and we had Canal+, who followed us to partially finance the second season. We took the risk of getting financing the rest of the show, and we ended up selling this show globally on Netflix and on some other territories as well. So this is typically an exercise that, I mean, we replicated later on other territory with a smaller budget. Again, I mean, it's possible. You can have a show which, I mean, doesn't cost a fortune, that can travel. And we go back to what José was saying at the beginning. The essence is the writing. I mean, if you have a good story, if you have like something really strong, I mean, let's put it the other way. If you don't have something really strong at the beginning on the writing, there is no way you're going to make a good show. But if you have something strong, then your chances to make a good show at the end, I mean, will increase at every step that you'll be able to make. Maybe actually, just to make a little break, yeah?
Can you talk a little bit about the financing of a show like Marseille or Hostages?
Sure, very, yeah. I mean,
are you giving up the rights? Is Netflix now part owner of the show? Where does the money come from?
Marseille is an original. So Marseille now is the same way. It's the same way they have like Stranger Things or this original. Marseille is a true original. So basically, Netflix is financing the entire season. They own the show. They give us some right back to exploit television at one point, but basically they own the show. Okay.
So you took that into them and pitched it to them, and they bought it.
Yeah, exactly. exactly. So on this one, but today I have another 5 or 6 or even more now. I'm doing like other series with Netflix, which ultimately are qualifying in the US, for example, as Netflix original, and although they're not. So maybe I can show you like a little presentation just to give you an idea of, I mean, it's the short one, like it's a 30-second, but that will give you, so I can keep talking about what I'm saying right now. Almost. This one was a very short one. If that's of interest to you later, I can show you something more detailed so you can go much more into the show, because here, on what you saw very briefly, you have some shows that are very expensive. I mean, not to American standard at 10 million, but I mean, to European standard, like at $1 million, $1.5 million per episode. And I have shows there that are like below 300,000 an episode. And those shows, I've been traveling on almost similar basis, and I have touched as many viewers internationally on a similar basis. So that's quite interesting to imagine that. Basically, the other model that we've been working on with them, you can always go and pitch with Netflix, like if we go with on hostages. At that point, I mean, basically, one thing that Netflix wanted at the beginning when they launched is they wanted to have like other shows that will be local. I mean, that will have a strong local insight on the territory, and that could travel as well. So we had like Hostages, which I mean was a success on Canal+, and for them to come after Canal+, which in France was, I mean, a big competitor at that point. I think that today. I'm not going to say who's going to win or won the war, but that's irrelevant. But anyway, I mean, for them it was very interesting to be able to be present with a show that had like a strong base in France and that could travel internationally. So we did that, and basically on season 2, just to go back to the financing, we had like a pretty big license from Canal+ in France. We had like a few smaller deal as well internationally, and pretty quickly Netflix came on board and completed the financing. I mean, when I say quickly, we produced the show. We were like so scared they would not pick it up, but ultimately they did, and it became like a very, I mean, yeah, lucrative business for us. I mean. It's a show that didn't cost too much money, and that ultimately was sold worldwide on a pretty strong basis, and that worked pretty well. I mean, we did that later on with some other shows from small territory. When I say small territory as well, like with really small budget, we have now several shows from Belgium. Belgium recently, the public broadcaster in Belgium, on French-speaking Belgium, RTBF, they launched a new program, say mostly to film producers. They come to us and deliver some really strong TV series to us. Basically, they had to write a script and to shoot like a very short 10-minute pilot, mini pilot, on which when they got to that first stage, they got that small pilot financed, but really with almost nothing. And the premise of the deal was you have to do this show at 250,000 euro in Belgium, so which is I mean pretty aggressive, and they did it. And some of the shows that we had, like The Break that you saw here, which is also on Netflix, which was on France 2 prime time, which was on Sky Germany with a great success, and ultimately on Netflix as well worldwide. Ultimately, we put like a little more money to help them finish the show, but this show cost less than 300,000. Now, in the second season, we're trying to pay people a little better because it's only fair, obviously, because, I mean, if you do show for like such a tight budget, I mean, people don't get paid very well, obviously, but it was like a challenge for everybody to make that happen. And so we did that with The Break. We did that with another series, Border Town in Finland. I mean, you know, Scandinavia became like very famous with the bridge and all this big show in Scandinavia. So everybody wanted to do big Scandinavian show, which became like pretty expensive as well. I mean, now in Scandinavia, in between Sweden, Denmark, it's impossible to have a show below $1 million per episode. And we went to Finland, which was like a tiny country, and all the other big Scandi people were looking at them like the small brother, like the poor little guy that doesn't even speak the same language. No one would care about them. And we managed to do this show, which, I mean, really for, again, like less than 300,000 on the first season, which looked fantastic. I mean, there is a good thing in Finland that you should know. I mean, but you probably have that in Portugal, but although today is probably not the best day to see that. They have an amazing light. The light in Finland is like you don't need to be a great DOP to look like you're the best DOP in the world. Although they have good DOP, it's not what I'm saying, but the light is exceptional. I mean, you have something that looks stunning, but again, if we had that, it's because the stories. We had like very strong stories. And you know, when we started the company, at the beginning, we really wanted to have our first show on the air. And on the first show that we didn't like, we wanted to shoot at a certain date, and we let the producer go a little before we were really happy with the script, and that show never sold. Never. Nothing. Zero. We lost like $500,000 for us at the beginning. It was like a lot of money to lose this kind of money, and the show did zero. It was painful. So believe me, after that, we were on the script from the beginning until the end to know that at least we know that we like it. I'm not saying that we win all the time, but usually, so far, we did pretty good with very strong script. And this show that went to Netflix after that also was sold, I mean, to different territory. I mean, actually, it's going to be soon in Portugal, on Sundance, on RTP soon as well, this one. It was on Germany, it was in France, I mean, all over the world, and as well on Netflix now. Now we shot we're shooting season 2 as right now. We're like editing season 3, and we have already a season 3 ordered already. So you know it's possible on this smaller show to make them great and to travel internationally. So that's one of the key message, and this kind of model is absolutely doable for Netflix as well. Netflix obviously is not the only option. I mean, we did like another show recently that just premiered in Berlin at the Berlinale. It's a German show. It's a co-production, ZDF Arte. And this one, ultimately, we didn't make a deal with Netflix. We did like a quite interesting combination. I mean, it was just announced a few days ago, so I'm happy to discuss that. We did a combination with HBO Europe, with Channel 4, with Sundance Iberia, that was announced. And we will announce shortly, with one big platform in the US. It will be announced. So it was a very interesting combination as well. And ultimately, another big platform took some of the other rights for the rest of Europe. So lots of combinations are possible, and there is a lot of hope. So that's the good news, and I think it's not because you are on a country that doesn't have huge budget, but if you have the good story, I mean, I'm happy to help you make them travel.
Thank you.
Yes?
Thank you very much for your speech and share with us your experience. That is really very big. I have two questions. One is, are you thinking in the Molina speech, are you working more with IPs or original ideas? And how do you, and if you can share with us the difference in Europe about the relation with the traditional networkers like Arte, ZDF, Channel 4, and Netflix?
First of all, before anything, we're extremely opportunistic. Again, as I said, we started as a small startup, and we still have the feeling that we are a small startup. So if there is something that we like, we just jump on it. And it's true that within the company, I mean, several people, I mean, I'm heading international, so obviously I'm in charge, I'm meeting with lots of international buyers, but several of the person in the company, if someone really likes a show, will go and say, I believe we can do. Usually we will follow that lead and make that happen. So internationally, we will go and meet with, I mean, a producer like you today, and if you have like a good idea to pitch to us, we read everything, and we try to come back to you fairly quickly and say, we believe we can make that happen, and that's the way we can try to make it happen. Obviously, on this kind of structure, we like when, I mean, especially for a local producer, that you have a local network attached. I mean, we probably wouldn't go here and say, I have a great idea, but I have no one attached. I mean, that could happen, but then that would happen on the show that we will produce 100% ourselves. But if you come and pitch something to us, it's easier, again, I mean, there are no real rules, but it's easier if you know what would be your anchorage local. Because, I mean, that's what we're looking for, is to have something which has something very strong locally that we believe we can help you maybe at the writing stage, help you to make sure that maybe there are a few adjustments to be made so it can travel better. And we can come at a different stage, even at development stage if it's necessary. Sometimes it's needs like to have like additional writers, so we can hire additional writers if that's logical to help to make it happen.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And about the experience dealing with the pitching projects to Netflix and versus pitching to the other channel.
As I said, we have like really the two things that we're doing. We have the Netflix original, and that we go to Netflix, and once in a while we present them like a big, I mean, original. So far, the only one that was officially picked up as an original was Marseille. But we have lots of shows that we work with them that have like other broadcaster attached, and for example, also now we have a kids division, as you might have seen on the presentation that we just launched 2 years ago. And that kids division, for example, we did a series called Find Me in Paris, which happened at the Paris Opera House. We'll be the first one to shoot officially in the Opera House, so it's very exciting. That's a co-production that we're doing with ZDF that was just picked up by Hulu. So you see, so everything is possible. And again, I mean, the question is, how can you find like the mechanism that makes the most sense? And usually when we will come on something like that, we'll have like a plan A, B, C, D, and hopefully we make it happen.
Thank you. Merci.
If anybody anybody has any questions for me as well, I can join.
Please, please.
Well, this is Vitor Castro Rosa. I'm with the GEDIP, Study and External Relations Department. I was curious to know, being an over-the-top operator, Netflix is out of scope of the new proposition of regulation for broadcasting online and retransmission. But having an approach which is territory by territory, so a territorial approach to the countries where you have your activities. I was wondering whether you are more favorable of country of origin or country of destination in terms of acquiring licensing rights, because that is an issue that is going on currently. Thank you very much.
I'm not sure I got exactly.
Where do you prefer to have your rights acquired and negotiated, your licenses obtained? Is it a territory by territory approach, or would you prefer to have?
I mean, what makes more sense? I mean, for us, as I said, on this German series, we ended up selling it almost territory by territory, although we had like a global offer as well, and it was more logical to sell it like that. But there is no rule. I mean, at the end of the day, as I said, we will try to find partners all over the world, and at the end of the day, we want our partner and us to make as much money as possible. You know, we're very simple people. I mean, we just need to make a good show and make good money.
Thank you very much.
So.
How do you make shows that look that good on such a small budget? Because I'm watching this and I'm going, and in my head I'm guessing, oh, that's probably between 4 and 6 million per episode, and then you tell me it's 300,000. Are there? And this is going to sound
not all of them, but some are more expensive.
So, and this is going to sound it's going to sound like a weird question, but are there labor unions in Europe that you?
No. Okay. So that's a fair and very honest question. Obviously, when you go on those small level, I mean, you don't go union full time. In France, we can't do this kind of show at 300, unfortunately, because of the union, because it doesn't work. In Belgium, it's possible. There are a few territories that, although, I mean, ultimately the goal is on season 2 that everybody gets paid much more well than on season 1, and everybody's taking a gamble. But those I mean, Israel is known to make like really amazing show. I mean, I don't know if you've seen Fauda or Hostages or this kind of show. I mean, their show that are like costing like really, I mean, less than 300.
And so, are you getting big tax rebates from where we were shooting? No.
No. Though, I mean, these almost
my mind
it's really.
Is blown.
Yeah, no, I know. I mean, now, I mean, the great thing in Portugal, you're going to get like your big tax rebates. So I can't wait to come here, by the way. So no, it's fantastic what you're doing, and it's really good to have that. Again, I mean, it's an adjustment. There are like certain territory. It's true that I mean, the world of television has changed dramatically. The best example is like just like 5 years ago, if you wanted to see like a big shot of Marseille, you would need like 2 helicopters and one huge whatever. Now you just put a drone and it's costing you nothing, and you have like amazing images for nothing. So that's a huge change. I mean, if you look actually, most of those shows, we're using drones on a big basis. I mean, you have this big, it looks like a huge money shot, and it's a cheap money shot. I mean,
it's a GoPro with
exactly,
a camera.
Yeah. So it's fantastic. So you can have things like that for nothing, and so that's a good way to save money and to look good. I mean, then we don't send dragons fighting an army of 1,000, which I mean will cost a little more. But although, I mean, we managed to, I mean, in Israel, I mean, with even a big crowd, it's not that expensive. In Eastern Europe, you can have big crowd as well, and do like a big epic in Czech Republic for.
Is part of the trick also avoiding digital effects as much as possible?
Digital effects are not so expensive. This is not, no, I mean, today digital effects are not as expensive as it was like even 5 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, you can do like great digital effect for, I mean, we have some, I mean, those shows don't have huge digital effect, but this is not what is killing us. I mean, on Find Me in Paris, we have some digital effect. I mean, we're doing, I mean, it's, the world is changing on the good way.
We should compare notes, because if I can go back to America and bring in Game of Thrones for like $3 million, I'd be a hero.
I know. Yeah, but they don't want to do it at 3 million.
No.
Now they're like, now it's the big game to say I'm doing like a 10 million show. I'm doing a 15 million show. I mean, oh, did I lose it? It's not working?
Excuse me.
Oh, okay.
It's part of the bragging rights.
Yeah, it's part of the game.
Hello, Eduardo Diaz from Viva Superstars. We have been seeing some very positive experiences of user interaction with the reality shows, talent shows, and so forth. What do you think could be the role of user interactivity on drama? So do you think there have been some experiences, but they have not really yet been, as far as we know, very successful? So
to have what?
user interaction, user interactivity, so or spectator interactivity. So imagine you like second screen interaction, other ways, first screen interaction, even on a tablet or something. So,
I mean, the world is changing and it will continue to change. I mean, right now, I mean, we've been investing on virtual reality as well. So will that be the next big thing? I mean, at this point, we're like chipping in and see if it's going to work. I mean, it seems to be really interesting. We just created like a new genre label as well, which does, I mean, special effects for very cheap. And so, I mean, yeah, I mean, second screen, yeah, why not? I think at the beginning you need a good story. All the rest is added value. But if you don't start with the beginning, I mean, as Jose was saying, you need to come with the little thing that will make the difference. So if your second screen will make the difference, fine. I remember we had one show that we were developing, which was like almost fully interactive, that it was a kids show, which actually we all ended up not doing, but was made as a Netflix original on the remake based on an Israeli series. And they have like this interactive thing, which at the end of the show, the kids come back and there is a kind of a fake social network that you can play on, and then you interact with the character of the show. So everything that can make it like better, newer is always good. I mean, but you have to start with a good story.
And I think you have to design whatever program you're doing to require that second screen, because I think from the storyteller standpoint, the last thing I want while my story is unfolding is for there to be a second screen here going yip, 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 and interrupting the flow of what I'm trying to do. So the second screen has to be part of the narrative in some integral way. In fact, I'm working on, a friend of mine and I are working on developing a show that is built completely interactively, that as you watch it, when you get to a certain point in the show will send you a text message. And then you'll be able to respond, and what you respond will unfold certain clues, and then you go online and you follow certain clues. So it's built to be that way. But I think we're, at least in the States, I think we're still a good ways away from that being a real part of what you're going to see on your TV.
I do have a question for both of you, actually. a series picked up for 13 episodes, for instance, in the States. Normally 13 episodes and it goes well, 22, and then a second season. How come, as a creative and writers, I think you imagine a story for 13 episodes, and suddenly the network says, no, it's 22. No, it's 8 seasons. So how this process goes?
Well, the good part about working with outlets like Netflix, Amazon, and Hulu is that when they say 10 or when they say 13, that's what it is. These outlets don't go to 22, so it's only the big four, ABC, CBS, NBC, and Fox, that might happen. And it creates a big problem. In fact, 24 was designed to be 24 episodes, but famously, season 1, they only picked up 13, so that if it was unsuccessful, they would cancel it. So the writers wrote a plan up to the 13th episode, and then when they got the pickup, they were like, what the hell are we going to do now? And that just happened to a good friend of mine created the show Elementary, the Sherlock Holmes show on CBS, and it's their final season, and they told him, you have 13 episodes. So it wasn't just for the season. For this entire series, he wrote the 13th episode as the climax of the entire show, and then because another show got canceled, they added 8 episodes. So now his 13th episode is the series finale, but he's got 8 more episodes after that. So the answer is you tap dance, and you think as fast as you can, and you always... Look, when you're writing anything, you're always hoping that you'll get to tell more stories, so you always leave doors open for yourselves so that you can pull from story. You never want to answer all your questions, ever. No matter if it is the series finale, you want to make sure that there are still certain questions in the audience's mind. And if you get surprised with an additional episode order, you can start pulling on those threads to create more story. But it can be, I've had it happen to me, it can be a real challenge.
He's a very good tap dancer. Okay, so if we find... You're very welcome.
Fazemos agora a nossa pausa e obviamente que terão um bom bocado também para quem quiser ainda voltar a falar com os nossos convidados. Voltamos ao meio-dia. Até já.